All right, so I would like to talk about midpoint. Um, Midpoint of a line segment is obviously the point that is halfway between the endpoints of a line segment. So midpoint, the term obviously makes sense. It's the point in the middle of the line segment. Now, one of the skills that students must learn is locating the midpoint of a segment if you are given the two endpoints. Well, let's start out by just thinking of the segment as a number line, just a standard number line. Let's say that we have the point 3, and so there's one point at 3 on the number line and another point at 11 on the number line. We want to figure out where is halfway between the 3 and the 11. There are a couple of ways to do this. You can ask yourself, well, how far is it from 3 to 11? Hopefully you see that from 3 all the way up to 11 would be 3 plus what equals 11? The answer is 8. So there are 8 units from 3 up to 11. Well, the midpoint then, wherever that is, it's going to have to be 4 units each way. 4 units above the 3 and 4 units below the 11. So 4 units above the 3 would be 7. That's the same as 4 units below the 11. Okay, now let's suppose we wanted to look at another approach. Where is the middle? Well, remember how we figured out already that it was 7? Well, what is 7? Isn't 7 the average of 3 and 11? Sure, if it's halfway in between, then it would have to be the average of the other two numbers. And how do you average two numbers? You add them together and divide by 2. 11 plus 3 is 14, and 14 divided by 2 is 7. So there are 2 ways to look at it. You can just think logically, or you can find the average. Think logically. How far apart are the 2 endpoints? And go halfway. Suppose we change this to -3. Well, how far is it from -3 to 11? From -3, first you have to make it up to 0. That's 3. And then from 0 up to 11 would be 11 more, giving us a total distance of 14. Well, halfway then would be 7 and 7. 7 above the -3 and 7 below the 11, which would put us at the coordinate 4. So 4 will be the midpoint of -3 and 11. Alternatively, we can just find the average of -3 and 11. -3 and 11 add up to -8. Sorry, to 8. -3 plus 11 is 8, divided by 2 is, again, 4. My personal preference is just to think about it logically without a formula, but there is a nice, pretty formula. Now, suppose you have the midpoint of points on a coordinate plane, like, let me pull out a coordinate plane here. So let's say you've got the point -1, 3, and is 1 point, and the other point is 3, 7. So -1, 3 would be about right here. There's -1, 3. And then the point 3, 7 would be, about right here maybe. And so the point that's halfway between those 2 points would be the midpoint, what we're looking for now. remember that we've got the x coordinates, the -1 and the 3, and the y coordinates. Well, so -1, oops, I'm going to black here. -1 is the x coordinate of this point here, and 3 is the x coordinate of this point here. -1 and 3. -1 and 3. Well, the midpoint, the x coordinate of the midpoint, is going to be halfway between the x coordinates of the endpoints. So what's halfway between -1 and 3? You can do either of those ways that I just previously demonstrated. From -1 to 3 is 4 units. So halfway would be 2 units. So the middle halfway between -1 and 3 is going to be 2 more than -1 or 2 less than 3. In either case, it's going to be 2. So we know the x coordinate of that midpoint is 2 because, oh goodness gracious, I messed that up badly. It's 2 units. What's 2 more than -1 and 2 less than 3? That will be 1. So sorry. 1. And the y coordinates, here we have a 3, and here we have a 7. 7 and 3 are the y coordinates. What's halfway between 7 and 3? It's 5. Because the total distance between 3 and 7 is 4. Cut that distance in half, and you've got 2 going in each direction from the midpoint. 2 up from 3, or 2 down from 7. So 1, 5 is the coordinates of the midpoint. 1 is the x coordinate, 5 is the y coordinate. Alternatively, you could have calculated the 1 by averaging these two x coordinates, -1 and 3, which would be a 1 would be the average, and the average of 3 and 7, 3 plus 7 is 10, divided by 2 is 5.